the second session of Climate Conversations is The Futures of Biodiversity, Changing World, Changing Questions. It's a panel discussion with a very formidable star cast, each of whom have and continue to, in their own way, contribute immensely to questions of biodiversity. Frankly, I think our little stage can't quite hold the weight of their stature, but we are truly very thrilled and happy that they are here with us today to speak to all of you. The panel is moderated by the brilliant, the thoughtful, and the very gentle Dr. Pande. Dr. Pande teaches courses on literature and cultural history in the Department of Germanic Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. She has a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, and takes an active interest in gender studies, discourses of violence, representations of disease and death in literature, and human-animal studies. In her research, she explores processes of othering across a broad spectrum, ranging from political belief to gender identity and species belonging. She is an experienced literary translator and is also co-founder of the Indian Animal Studies Collective. Anu, thank you so much for leading this discussion, and thank you so much to our panelists. Please join me, everyone, in welcoming them to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session, which foregrounds the fact that biodiversity loss isn't only a technical or scientific problem, but it's also a question of how we live, what we value, and which futures we imagine as possible. This panel begins from the idea that the questions themselves are changing. They are shaped by climate change, by dominant models of development, by ideas of security, and by the ways in which we remain connected or disconnected from the more than human world. Our esteemed panelists bring distinct but complementary perspectives to this inquiry, and it is a real honor for me to be here with them on a stage and to be able to introduce them. Dr. Asad Rahmani is one of India's most respected conservationists and ornithologists. Former director of the Bombay Natural History Society, he has played a key role in wildlife research, policy, and advocacy over several decades, bringing a long and deeply informed perspective on conservation institutions and practice in India. Dr. Ravi Chellam is a wildlife biologist and conservation scientist with over 4 decades of experience, from field research on species like the Asiatic lion to sustained engagement with conservation policy, governance, and public debate. His work pushes us to think critically about conservation in relation to justice, development, and local communities. Rushikesh Chavan is a wildlife filmmaker and conservation communicator whose visual storytelling makes complex conservation issues accessible to wider publics. His work foregrounds the power of narrative and representation in shaping how wildlife and conservation are understood. Rather than offering definitive answers, this conversation invites reflection, debate, and attentiveness to what is being lost and to how responsibility for biodiversity futures is shared among experts, institutions, communities, and all of us here. With that in mind, I'd like to begin by asking each of my panelists today to reflect briefly on how the questions around biodiversity have changed over the course of their own work. So thinking about the fact that we often describe biodiversity loss as a crisis, but the word crisis can either mobilize or it can paralyze. So from where each of you stands, what is the most important question about biodiversity we should be asking today that we weren't asking even 10 or 15 years ago? Please, would you like to start?
Okay, I'll take this. Thank you. I would say that it is not a crisis, it is an emergency, biodiversity emergency. Because the way we are losing biodiversity, particularly the species which are generally neglected, like plants, no one talks about the plants, no one talks about the insects. More than 60% of the insects have disappeared. Either they disappeared completely or the population has gone down very, very low. So it is a crisis which we should be, just a minute, where is your question? Then we should be talking about it. We should be not only talking, we should be taking action for that. These are my initial words, but I'll be speaking later also, something like that,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So a focus on the insect life as well. No? That's a wonderful thought. Thank you.
Just to build on what Dr. Rahmani said, for too long, large mammals and charismatic birds have dominated the biodiversity conversation. Like all of us, biodiversity cannot exist if their habitats don't exist. So we really need to focus on habitats. No further degradation of functional ecosystems, no further fragmentation of functional ecosystems. We can't continue to fool ourselves, delude ourselves that somehow destructive development can take place and biodiversity would be conserved. And we often hear of this multiple planetary crisis, climate change, land degradation, biodiversity. It's all faces of the same coin. These are only for our understanding and ease. We tend to develop several silos into which we have these conversations, but it's really one. Unless we learn to live more sensibly, more gently, and more empathetically with other forms of life, our future is not very bright. I'm sorry to be bleak to begin with, but I think the truth needs to be said.
Yes, I think we are well past the time where we could delude ourselves with things that sounded good. Now it's time to
Doesn't sound like that. I mean, people want to take over Greenland and things like that. So,
Thank you. Rishi.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for turning up in such numbers. I think what you had said, what has changed in 20, 30 years, I think the linkages between biodiversity and aspirations is something that is completely neglected or not even understood. That if we have to meet our aspirations of India, Viksit Bharat and $10 trillion economy, you cannot achieve it without biodiversity. And I think today is the time where if action is not taken, neither are we going to have species on this planet or a planet that we know as we know it, but also our aspirations are not going to be met. And I think that is the most critical aspect to be looked at.
Thank you for that. And since I noticed that we have a lot of young citizens here with us, which is really great to see, I thought perhaps I could ask all of you to get into a bit of a narrative mode, because terms like habitat loss and resource overuse, etc., may sound pretty abstract. And I was wondering if each one of you could share a moment from your work over the years when the sheer scale of what is being lost felt very real and maybe very personal to you.
I, in the field, have spent the most time in Gir forest in Saurashtra, Gujarat, studying the lions. I first went there in December of '85, and I kind of wrapped up my work in March of '90. So it's about 4.5 years that I was living there. And after that, I used to go at least once a year till 2013, after which it's become a little risky for me to go there, so I've not been there. But in those years, what I saw really shocked me. When I went, Sasan was a sleepy village with barely any electricity, and by the last few visits, it was a 24/7 thriving economy, loud blaring music, lights through the night, incessant traffic. And these are roads and villages in which in daytime I've seen large wildcats walk through. And now even at night, you couldn't imagine animals going through. So that's what is happening. This is right at the edge of Gir, the home to the only population of lions in Asia. And this is what we've kind of resulted in. I mean, going back to Dehradun, which is not related to my work, I first went there in '85. Soon it became a capital. Entire greenery is gone. The climate has lost its rhythms. Hot summer day, 233, we could expect rainfall and hail. And in 15 years, that changed. And that is scary.
Okay. Thank you, Ravi. We have already said about the habitat change, but I would want to bring out the habitats on which not many people discuss, particularly the wetlands and the grasslands. We will be discussing about grassland later also. There are some habitats which are really in great trouble, and many of them, the coast, we have got around 7,000 square kilometer, 7,000 kilometer coastline, but many of these coastlines are destroyed in the sense that development has taken place. Mud flats and rocky coastline. I went with Rushikesh in the Maharashtra coastline, rocky coastline. They also have their own biodiversity. It's not necessary. So some habitats have been really battered compared to the forest and other areas. Forests have also degraded, but some have also improved. For example, Ravi, when I 60s, when I used to go to Mussoorie, most of the hills were barren. But now it is all green because the last 30 to 40 years, so all well protected. So we can protect it if we want to do it. That's what and we have to accept that some habitats need to be protected. Thank you.
Because Dr. Rahmani said Maharashtra coastline, I'm going to start with marine. He signed my advance in 2006 to go to Lakshadweep. It was my first time, and it's 400 kilometers off the west coast of India, right? So through the night when I landed there in the morning, or rather docked there in the morning, the sands were white. I'd never seen white sand before. And the watercolor was turquoise. I mean, turquoise is something I had only read about, right? There are turquoise waters. And hundreds of sea turtles bobbing their heads up for breathing. I went crazy. And when I first dived there, or not dived, they didn't allow me to dive, but the snorkel session, I was like, what world is this? I'd never imagined corals to be so colorful, pretty. Sharks, I mean, Jaws had ruined sharks for me, but when I saw sharks like 3 feet from me and they were just curious and then swam away. I think and I've been going there since 2006, so it's almost 20 years now. Now the corals, 50% of them are gone. Water temperatures, I remember first time I dived, it was when I came out, I was so cold that I was shivering. Now I'm sending rovers down to 200 meters, and the temperature 200 meters is 28 degrees. It's like a hot water bath. In summers, if you go to lagoons like Bangaram, there is so much algae you can't swim, and the groupers are gone, sharks are gone, turtles you will barely see any. I think it's the most drastic changed habitats that I've seen, which I thought was isolated. Far away, 400 kilometers in the ocean. I can speak about grasslands, but I think I'm going to stop at marine.
No, this is really, I mean, it's moving, it's disturbing the way you describe it. You know, one reads about the warming of the oceans, but for you to have actually gauged it and to have felt it in your practice must be really a deeply disturbing, a scary almost experience. But then there are times when there are things that we have read about, never encountered in personal life, and then we as lay people sometimes encounter them, and it can also be a deeply moving experience. I know that I had read about these olive ridley hatchlings making their way to sea, and it sounded like quite a phenomenon, but you think, yeah, it's been happening forever, you know, that's what they do, that's what they are genetically programmed to do. But I remember standing on the beach one night, actually watching this happen, rooting for the little ones to make it in there, also so amazed by how they knew instinctively where to go and what to do next. And it almost made me break down in tears, because it was lovely to see that they make it, but it was also heartbreaking to realize that they are a very small number of what they could have been, what they used to be earlier. Thinking about how I waited at the beach observing these hatchlings brings me to my next question, and this is to Dr. Rahmani. Your work is grounded in long, patient observation, watching birds, landscapes, and patterns change over decades. What does this sustained attentiveness in the field allow us to understand about biodiversity that other approaches, maybe faster ones, more managerial ones, would tend to overlook?
Regarding your question of sustained interest, that is my one word answer. Unless you are interested, you won't be able to sit in a hide for 7 hours continuously when the temperature is 45 degrees centigrade outside or 48 degrees. So you have to have interest. That's what I've seen Ravi also in the field, and I've seen Rushikesh. So in BNHS as well as in Madhya places, interest is the first thing which sustains you, which overlooks all the problems of the field work like that. So that is, I certainly will encourage youngsters to to get interested in nature conservation. What was your second question?
No, that was the one, just to ask what this attentiveness, sustained attentiveness can bring in.
And I'll add one more. Then you also have to write your observations. So unless you write it down, you will not be able to, get it back again after 10, 15 years. So yesterday I gave a lecture on how to write the notes and other things, the importance of notes and your own observations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My next question is to you, Ravi, and you had mentioned the big cats and the charismatic species, and I wanted to ask you to maybe elaborate on that a little bit. So the debates that we find in the media and in public discourse around Asiatic lions, a species that you worked on, as well as the whole question of cheetah introduction. Thank you for the correction this morning, because I was texting Ravi and saying something about cheetah reintroduction, and he gently corrected me, gently but firmly, to tell me it is not a reintroduction, it is an introduction of African cheetahs to India. And I thought that was an important point. But all of these debates around large carnivores often attract, of course, intense public and political attention. And I was wondering what you think, what is it that these episodes, this interest reveals about power, spectacle, and the kind of conservation stories that we choose to tell and focus on, and the ones that we choose to ignore?
Large cats and large mammals in general have strong cultural connections. They are deified, they're appropriated by royalty centuries ago and continue to be appropriated by present-day royalty. And you can well understand why that is happening. I mean, there is certain charisma, power, beauty in it. But that is, in many ways, a double-edged sword, because when people tend to identify too closely with a species, then it becomes their own interests and aspirations rather than what is good for the species. And to that extent, the 2013 judgment of the Supreme Court on the lion translocation issue is a fantastic judgment, because it very clearly states the only lens to use when you deal with conservation is what is the best interest of the species. The rest of it should not come into the conversation also. With specific reference to the Asiatic lions and the African cheetahs, and this is something I cannot but talk because I've been dealing with this for about 40 years now. And my PhD was about generating ecological information to inform a translocation. It's a Government of India plan mandated by the National Board for Wildlife. And since that didn't happen, somebody filed a public interest litigation. The Supreme Court ordered in 2013 6 months, lions should be translocated, and it's illegal to bring African cheetahs. It is 12 years and more. The Asian lions haven't moved, which is the order of the Supreme Court, but African cheetahs have come to Kuno, which is the site chosen for lions. That tells you how science, rule of law, common sense, logic don't matter in conservation, not just in India, globally. It is the personal likes, dislikes, and oversized political influence that individuals can bring to the table, which seems to decide the course of action, which in a democracy should not be accepted. It is our wildlife, it is our country, and it's about time citizens spoke up and claimed that space. And that is where India is lacking. We do not speak up enough, we do not stand up enough for conservation.
Thank you for that. And I was also really intrigued to know, Ravi, that your early work was on the langurs, in fact. And so from the langurs to the Asiatic lion, you have, kind of seen how one of the species did become sort of like the poster species of conservation, and the other one is still seen largely as a pest. No? And it's always fascinating for me to see how it is not so much something about the species themselves, but rather about what use or lack of use we put or ascribe to them that makes us determine whether they are worth saving or not.
It's human perception rather than ecological function.
Yes. It's just what you were saying a little earlier as well. My next question is to Rushikesh. Rushikesh works with the Habitats Trust, which works explicitly at the intersection of biodiversity loss, climate change, and social and economic aspirations. And I wonder, Rishi, where do you see the greatest tensions between these very different goals, the social and economic aspirations of populations and nations, as well as, the idea of halting or slowing down biodiversity loss, slowing down climate change. Where are the tensions, and have you, in your practice, ever seen them align and work together as well?
I don't know if there are tensions. People don't even consider biodiversity. So, but where is the underlying tension? I think it's the short-term profits versus long-term orientation, right? If I'm a CEO, if my balance sheet doesn't look nice at the end of the year, I may not be the CEO. If I'm a minister, I don't know whether I'll survive the next election. So the system is designed in a way which makes it very difficult to be honestly looking at long-term sustainability. And these are nice jargons, and it's good to say on these platforms like these. But when it comes to taking a decision, people, that's where the tension comes in. The second part of your question, how do I, as a Habitats Trust, how do we look at it? Say, for example, now we are working with the government of Maharashtra, where government of Maharashtra wants to become a $5 trillion economy. Their obvious route is more mining, more infrastructure, connect hubs. They're calling it a Nagpur hub and a Mumbai hub and things like that. So I sat with them. I sat with the chief economic advisor and others, and told them, I can prove it to you with all economic theories that you're not going to achieve your targets. And now we've signed an MOU where we are saying that how you can to achieve something like this, you need an 7 to 8% real growth year on year and not an inflated, non-adjusted apparent growth. At the same time, I don't think we'll get 8%, but at least 5% real growth is possible if you don't look at natural assets as something to take out of, but as a capital which you can yield and take it from the interests of it. So now we are helping them set up a nature asset company which will kind of restore degraded areas and stuff like that, and which we believe that working with marginalized farmers who are, has the highest suicide rates in the country, how do you change them from a subsistence farming to a profit-making farming, which is ecologically better, right? So giving these solutions becomes critical in these areas, so that while the politician can have his next election and a CEO can make his numbers, the biodiversity, ecology, climate change is integrated into it.
Thank you. Dr. Rahmani, I wanted to ask you, because you've written about the idea of vicarious conservation, the idea that not everybody needs to be in the field to care deeply or to act meaningfully for biodiversity and for the environment. What modes of behavior or what kinds of actions do you think people like us can take if we care to protect the environment, given the fact that not all of us will end up working in the field?
Thank you. When I was the director of BNHS and later also, many people who are not directly connected with wildlife conservation, but they are interested. They used to ask me, how can I help you? So my simple answer is that you may not be able to give time because of various reasons. You may not be able to go to the field, or you may not be, but you can give your funds. You can help others who are doing conservation. And most of the conservation organizations need funding. So if I can't do it, then I can help others to do it. And I know, and then volunteer work. I was connected with the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, UK-based. 90% of their funding is through the small donations and big donations. So, because they have, and they have got nearly 50,000 staff, and probably half of the staff is volunteer. And some people come only for 2 days in a week or 1 day in a week. That is the way. So that is a sort of a vicarious pleasure. They get pleasure because someone else is protecting nature for them. Not only for them, for the humanity itself. So that I consider as and I request people who cannot do directly, then help people who are doing it. So that is my way of looking at it. Thank you.
But that's so inspiring to know that such a large number of volunteers come up to help. And I wonder what the situation is like in India, whether we have similar kinds of volunteer engagement or whether we are still lacking in that.
We are still lacking it because we don't have the culture of donation except for Mandir Masjid mein dete hain. We don't give it. Almost 90% of the money, anyways. What we get it for wildlife conservation is less than 1% of the funds which are given. It's not that we Indians also don't give funds, but they give it for the other reasons, and rightly so. I'm not saying that they should give all the funds for wildlife conservation. And there are many other people, way of working in it. You can give your expertise, opinion. Now we have got hundreds of thousands of photographers. So when they ask me, what can I do? I said, you donate your pictures to the organizations which can use it for conservation activity, conservation or awareness campaigns and that sort of a thing. So there are various ways, and everyone should be involved in conservation because nature involves all of us.
Thank you so much. Ravi, I was wondering, because you already spoke about how conservation and you problematize the idea of development as it is understood by those in positions of power very often. So I was wondering, when you argue that conservation cannot be separated from dominant modes of development, which assumptions about development do you think are most damaging for biodiversity in India in terms of how people understand it?
This whole concept of a GDP, it's a very narrow base. If a lot of people fall ill in India, our GDP will actually go up because we will spend a lot on hospitals and buy medicines. And that's how wonky the GDP metric is. And also how we define growth. Growth is defined by consumption, right? You have to increase domestic consumption for growth to take place. And where have we grown? We can't breathe the air, we can't drink the water, and so produce bottled water, which again adds to your GDP and your plastic pollution. So to me, this is not high-flown theory or economic practice. It is just common sense. And I've lived long enough, I turned 65 shortly, to have known that I've traveled by something called third-class train. Not many in this room would have done that. We could stop at any railway station, go to the tap, drink water. We used to carry mud cars. We actually had mud cars with us. Today, how many of us travel by train, drink water in railway stations other than from a bottle? Is this development? Is this truly development? And to also think of national security as something to deal with our borders and militarization and buying crores of rupees worth of planes which occasionally crash is again a very wrong notion of what is national security. How can India be an economically powerful, secure nation if significant proportion of our citizens go hungry to bed every day, don't have access to basic education, don't have access to basic health care? Security is not in our borders. Security is inside us, and we really need to invest both in our people and non-destructive modes of development. And people can't say the knowledge is not there, the models are not there. Going back to what Rushikesh was mentioning, CEOs operate to quarterly cycles, elected officials operate at best to 5-year cycles. Ecology, unfortunately, cannot fit that. And unless you break that nexus and change the tone of the conversation, trash GDP, look at well-being in a holistic way, look at health, those should be the parameters for really deciding. That's why Scandinavian countries always top the Human Development Index.
Yeah, it also makes me think about the case of Uttarakhand, where I think right now also this road widening project is going on at a very large scale in the names of national security, to say that the army should be able to be mobilized there at a short notice, so to speak, as well as to say that there are pilgrimage sites there and to make life easier for the pilgrims. But again, that ecology, those mountains were never meant to have those kind of roads, and when they are laid down, the degradation that follows is at the moment kind of being overlooked.
Our forefathers, ancestors had a lot of ecological and cultural sense. Sacred sites were always remote. Sacred sites were not easy to reach. There was a certain penance that you undertook in trying to reach and then realize, it was not just about visiting and putting some money in the hundi. It's about your own emotional, spiritual growth that pilgrimage was about. But today it is all reduced to a helicopter ride and things like that. So we've lost our way. We chest thump a lot about Indian culture, but this is not Indian culture. It's about time we all reflect back, because today the social discourse is so far removed from what really India means, at least the India I was born into.
Thank you. Rishi, I wanted to ask you, because we come to see and read about issues around biodiversity and biodiversity loss, as well as climate change, but these are very often two different conversations or two different discourses that happen. Although common sense would tell us that they are related, what do you think changes and what richness is brought to the conversation, and what kind of solutions can emerge if we were to merge these two, if there were to be a greater acknowledgement of the fact that it's the same conversation? Since you come from the solutions background, you find fixes.
Yeah.
So.
And there is no silver bullet to this, so I don't know how to answer this in a short manner. But essentially, I think the discourse still is either you have development or you have ecology, and those beautiful Venn diagrams, where the intersection is so that means the other side has nothing to do with this. These are flawed concepts which have been promoted. I don't know what your school books say, but I have seen textbooks which show that, and I'm like, no, this is not what it is, right? So the discourse has to change. They are concentric circles, right? Where the biggest circle is your ecology and environment and economy, society is within it, and ecology is within it, right? Unless this discourse changes, where we realize that no matter what you do, you're still taking from this one planet. Of course, now people want to go to Mars and mine it there and moon and everywhere. But essentially, whatever you're taking is on this planet, and whatever you're leaving is on the planet itself. And given the planetary feedback loops, it's going to affect us, right? And so from policy to on-ground action to education, I think you need to address each one of them. You cannot just do research, you cannot just do on-ground action, because without evidence, I think a lot of action has been taken without evidence, and I think that leads to saying that, but पेड़ लगाने से pollution तो कम नहीं हुआ, right? That comes out of a good heart, but probably not the right intervention. And I think unless you address these several things and change the discourse of that, if you, ecology is study, eco is home, and oikos is study, economics is home, and management, unless you understand that it's one and the same, you can't really change anything, and you have to fire on multiple cylinders. This is a random answer, but I think that is the best, shortest answer I could have given.
No, it wasn't random at all, and I thought it was put through in such a way that it spoke to all of us.
Anu, if I may add a humorous note to what
Absolutely.
Roshi just now said. Our daughter was in class 8, CBSE, one of the top schools in Delhi. One day she came back from school literally crying. I said, what happened? In her geography book, there was a sentence which said, wildlife is useful because it provides meat and leather. Okay, CBSE approved textbook. She being our daughter, she stood up in class and said, that is wrong. But the teacher said, no, it is what the book says. I don't know. The teachers might tell us.
So I'd like to pose one question again to all the three panelists, and after that I thought we could open up for Q&A from the audience as well. We speak about the power of local communities and what all one can get from them, as well as the impact that traditional knowledge can have and traditional cultural practices can have. So we find them being invoked in discourses very often, but they are usually not given center stage. So it's more of an afterthought. Yeah, let's also look at what local communities have been doing, etc. What do you think is lost when conservation becomes exclusionary in this way? And what would it mean if we were to take coexistence seriously as a guiding principle rather than just as a word?
From the Indian context, exclusionary conservation is plainly illegal. You cannot move people outside. And the fact of the matter is, you might draw lines on a map. Animals don't even recognize those lines, right? So you could say this side of the line is wildlife habitat, so people can't go in. But try telling that to wildlife, saying this side of the line is human habitat, you can't go. The magic of India is, we are the world's most populous nation, probably one of the most densely populated nations. And at least, looking at it from a large mammal perspective, we are home to some of the most largest, dangerous animals. And it's not as if people and animals are fighting on a daily basis, despite what the headlines capture. Headlines likes negative news. For every conflict, within quotes, that is reported, there are at least 100 non-conflict interactions that are taking place, which does not get reported. I think India is very uniquely placed to be a developed country with thriving wildlife and ecosystems, with people being part of the solution and not seen as part of the problem. And the Forest Rights Act does give them that space. The Wildlife Protection Act actually gives them that space, but it's misinterpreted. And the popular imagination is people and wildlife cannot stay together. To the extent that when I started in the 80s, I didn't hear this. By the mid-90s, people are saying, you want your lion, you want your tiger, you want your elephant, take it to your home in Bangalore. We don't want it, because we are throwing people out and saying that is for conservation. So they bristle when wildlife is seen as entering into their habitat. And this is not sustainable. You can't keep throwing people out. You can't keep disenfranchising them. You can't deculturize them, because you move people out of their cultural context, ecological context. They don't know how to deal with the big bad world.
Yeah, and an entire way of life is lost, even if people are forced.
Knowledge systems, knowledge,
yes, yes.
language.
Languages are
everything
impoverished because ways of life are lost now. Thank you. Dr. Rahmani.
Okay. I also had the same views, but slightly different, because for some species, we have to have exclusionary habitats. And for example, like rhino in Assam and other places, rhino is totally conservation dependent. You remove the protection and the rhinos will be gone in probably 2 years time, because I know the case of Assam, Lokwa Sanctuary. For 3 months, there was some conflict in 1983, 84, that time. They took away the guns from the guards, and 73 rhinos were killed. Every rhino was killed in Lokwa Burachapuri Sanctuary in 3 months' time. And there was a huge threat to the. So there are some species which have to be protected in the national park or sanctuaries and other places. But larger number of species are can and should be protected with the cooperation of the people. Even on those sanctuaries where rhinos or tiger or whichever species is there, people's protection is necessary. But in the larger landscape, and these days, the major threat to the species or the group of species are the species which live in the larger landscape, like grasslands and wetlands and scrublands and like that. Those species are the most threatened. There was an analysis done by the BirdLife International. I was connected with them in the world. They did the analysis and they found that the grasslands and desert species are the most threatened species in the whole world, not only in India. And the forest species are the bottom because a lot of forests are protected like that from their analysis point of view regarding the. So we should have a multiple protected areas, strictly protected areas, sanctuaries, people protected areas, multiple use areas, and we can go to other extent also. I don't advocate private protected areas, but Africa has shown that some of the private protected areas are doing very well. So personally I feel that we should have a multiple protected areas, conservation reserves, community reserves, sanctuaries, national park, and landscape reserves. We don't have a landscape reserves at present. So we should add one category where a very large number area is protected. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Anu, you just heard Dr. Rahmani, Dr. Ravi. It's far more nuanced, right? Two views. With people, it becomes very nuanced. About 10 years ago, and I can speak for myself, and I'll try to address this nuance, is 10 years ago, I was in this dilemma where you need protected areas, maybe inviolated, but the people are important. So we started merging social sciences, ecology, GIS, and economics, and many other things, and look at them as one. We didn't have a name to that stream then, so we started calling it conservation behavior. But what you realize is, one, I'm not going to repeat what they said, so I'm just adding to what has been said, is there is intergenerational loss of knowledge of ecology, right? I still go to remote areas and you talk to the younger generation, they have no clue. I can identify more when I don't call myself as a naturalist or ecologist or something. I can identify more in their backyard than they can, compared to say their grandfather. So nowadays you have to go and find the old person in the village and find that knowledge. So there is degradation. Aspirations have changed. Everybody wants to have this kind of a setup to live in. And so if you have to address that and ensure that the traditional knowledge, people's right to be in the place where they were born, if you have to kind of come up with those kinds of solutions, I think it's important that you work with them. I've also seen people go and we want to work with people, and they will tell the community what to do. I think that's such a wrong approach, right? You have to be there and evolve something with them, right? And then you realize that there are so many gaping holes, from knowledge gaps to aspirations to infrastructure gaps. And unless you kind of come up grounds up sometimes, of course you need the policy and to push and make things move on the ground, but also grounds up work, especially if you go to the Northeast where 99% of the forest or natural areas are with the communities, you will never be able to achieve biodiversity conservation or economic progress. And many areas are now prime example where these youth of 20-year-old, I know them, and now I would love to call them friends. I don't know if they call me, but they made a film and which we supported or something like this. And now the communities have given the community land for restoration. Earlier there was Zoom cultivation, which is slash and burn kind of a cultivation, and they are restoring it, right? The people have taken charge to restore it. So unless you don't go as if I will tell you what to do, and you let it evolve, at the same time you create these inviolate spaces for some species, because some species are very fragile, like salamander, for example. You would need that temperature, that water quality, all of that. You put plastic in that, the salamanders are not going to survive. So unless you come up with these kind of approaches, I think the approaches have to change. It's not people in the cities know what to do. You shouldn't parachute, but at the same time, bring your wisdom and your science there. Not necessarily all the traditional wisdom is evidence-based or is based in science. So you bring in your science, work with them, and I think that may be the winning formula.
And be humble.
Be humble.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think this is a really important point you make, Rishi, because it made me think also of, there is this book by Ambika Ayadurai called Tigers Are Brothers. And I was just thinking, there is this embedded knowledge already in an indigenous community whereby the tiger is recognized as kin. And the community has developed ways of coexisting, accepting certain amounts of loss but not getting retributive, and to come from outside and to try to tell them how to go about their lives and to take over those areas and to kind of try to tell them how now they have to be or not be with tigers is hubris, really, frankly speaking.
Little rich.
And pointless. Yes. Thank you so much. And I think we have a bit of time for questions from the audience. Please don't be shy. I can see that you want to ask something.
Yeah, hello, hi. So I was curious, so for example, a lot of conversation that you have also spoken now was between development versus environment. So on a general basis, if we see news and everything, we always see, okay, Viksit Bharat 2047, 30 trillion economy and all of this. And the other side, we have EPR guidelines, and if we see the carbon markets and the CCTS that is coming. So a lot of these conversations happen, but there's always that intersection that you were talking and the feedback systems are that you were talking. How do we actually look at this? So for example, I'm just done with my master's, and I don't understand if we have to look at in an exclusionary manner or an inclusive manner, because on a platform we talk that India has to be developed, but there's always the two sides of the same coin. So how do we look at that?
First thing is definition. What is development? What is the vision of development is what we need to question. We've stopped questioning. No, we in Indian citizenry, where is the active citizenship? Don't expect others to give answers. Seek answers of your own. Because otherwise somebody like me is coming and telling you what to think. I am not answering a question. It's a process question that Indian society needs to reflect upon. Ugly. Okay. Yeah, I don't know whether that helps, but that's my top of the head answer.
Can I answer? Just a small comment on that. We all talk about development versus conservation. I just would like to know from you that a water which is too polluted, where the fish cannot live, can you drink it? Or can we use it for industrial purpose? No. So we have to depollute the water, not only for the fish, for ourselves. So that sort of a development should be there, that where nature is also taken care of and we also develop it. I don't want to talk about the air in Delhi, which is unbearable. Okay, thank you.
Hi. I'm Deepa. I'm an environmental journalist. My question is this, that a lot of discourse about environment and biodiversity is largely urban. And, on one hand, we have people who are like pro-environment. And on the other hand, we have people who say that, why development is necessary, why are we, the people who are living in remote areas, why should they be devoid of, the privileges that we have in the city? How do we bring, the voices of those who are marginalized? What is their opinion, and how do we get that into the mainstream?
You carry on with what you last answered.
Yeah. So, because we also employ something called as a conservation psychology, and there's a term called environmental injustice, right? Say, for example, if I'm a villager staying at the fringe of a tiger reserve, and let me take you a live example. Say Tadoba, one human is killed every week around Tadoba, one human by a tiger. Okay, and I'm not talking about other conflict at all. To them, if you go and say, and I've spent days and months and years probably now sitting with them in their home and staying with them, they really, one uncle said to me, and he said that, "Ye tiger reserve, aap logo ke liye, right? This is for you. I have, my children and my grandchildren have never seen the tiger or gone inside the forest, right?" So when that is the situation where every night wild pigs are raiding your crops and one family person is killed somewhere or somebody you know is killed every week, I think the narrative here is, again, to look at, I mean, people say that there are people know how to live with wildlife and biodiversity, but I don't know whether it is out of choice or whether it is about the changed patterns that are there. So if you have to bring out their narrative to this, I think the gap is between the policy and the ground action that happens. So it may be a Pesa village, or there may be FRAs given, all of that, but that doesn't really address the issue. So if you have to address and answer them, I think there has to be a new paradigm shift completely. I would not recommend ki ye tweak kar do, change a little bit, because that's not helping. Many of us have tried, right? A whole paradigm shift is required, where it's not just about their narrative, it is about India being a very diverse country with different, economic backgrounds, political backgrounds, social structures, where I know one intervention does not work on one side of the road, where it works very well on this side because the caste is different, right? So completely new paradigm is required, and I think it's a 2-hour lecture of what a new paradigm looks like. So, you don't try to retrofit things or try to include them for the sake of inclusion is the answer to. I don't know. Ravi has been working on this.
Just want to add to that. Begin this discussion by accepting we have done mistakes, we have failed. Unless that acknowledgement is there, the real change will not come, because then it will be tweaks here, tweaks there. And it is unjust, and that justice has to be done.
Sorry, the gentleman at the back has been raising his hand for a long time.
Yeah, hello, thank you. So I have two questions. One is I want to talk about a sparrow, and I want to talk about a coconut tree.
What is your question?
Yeah. So I think one of the extinctions that we watched very closely in our urban space is about the house sparrow disappearing from the urban areas. That is because earlier we used to contribute knowingly or unknowingly some food to the birds by virtue of our lifestyle, and now that has changed drastically, and birds do not find any food in the urban areas. So how do you bring back the birds?
See, I did a project on sparrows for the Ministry of Environment, which I didn't want to do it because sparrow is not our priority, but there was too many questions about the sparrow. And we found that there are two major problems for the sparrows in the urban areas, not in the rural areas. We went together, the millions of sparrows in the rural areas. One is this, that they can't make a nest here. Modern buildings do not allow them to nest. And the second is that where are the small insects on which the sparrow baby is fed? Because it is, they are known as a granivorous birds, so they eat grains. But for baby to grow or the chicks to grow, they need proteinous diet. And I remember then in my the younger days and like that, when you walk on a lawn, our own lawn, there will be insects jumping in front of you. Now these days the lawns are sterile. So where is the food for the chickens? And these are the two major problems. Unless we solve these problems, the sparrows will not come back to the urban areas. And sometimes there are additional problems which are, I would say, they are minor problems. In the olden days, when the grain was shifted, there were sacks. So from the crop field, when we is putting it in the bullock cart, there some grain will fall. From the bullock cart, we is putting in the truck, there some grain will fall. At every stage, some grain will come out. Now we are shifting it to the plastic. So nothing comes out. But this is a minor thing, and the major things is these two things. Thank you. And there's no connection with the mobile towers. There's no connection whatsoever.
Hello, sir. So my question is directed to you, Mr. Ravi, but by extension to the whole panel. So I was very inspired when you said that India is currently at the phase which can potentially be developed, coexist, and protect its conserve its animals. And the reason I was inspired is because I have been just actively reading about all of this only for 10 years and more seriously in the past 3 years. And I've been finding it very difficult to be hopeful. So my question has been how, through so many years of work in this field, where do you find the hope and what makes you hopeful?
Well, I have a half serious, half humorous answer to that. In conservation, you have to be an optimist. And do not expect financial rewards. They will come. I mean, I have not gone hungry to bed in a long time, but do not try and match your expectations with that of a banker or somebody like that. If you, as Dr. Rahmani said, commitment, enthusiasm cannot die. Because in conservation, your victories are what we call ephemeral, meaning you go to sleep thinking you won this battle. Next morning, there'll be 100 other problems which are going to undo your victory. And in conservation also, we say it is a science of eternal vigilance. You can't afford to say at any point of time, we have succeeded. In tigers, 1972-73, Project Tiger was launched because there was a crisis. For 20, 30 years, things went well. We shifted our focus or we lessened our protection. Suddenly, there was a slump again. So those are the kind of things that if you understand, if you integrate it into your philosophy and thinking, automatically you will find the energy. And you shouldn't look at conservation as a work. I have definitely looked at it as a career, but to me, it's not like a 9-to-5 job. That engagement has to be from politics, from economics, from arts, literature, all forms of living. And conservation is not a personal goal. It always has to be a team effort. It has to be for everybody. Never look at this as a personal, selfish goal. That's again, some people call themselves tiger man, elephant man, and it's never a woman, it's always men. So those are all wrong language to use, long approaches to use. Again, it's a long-winded answer. I don't know whether that makes any sense, but I'm happy to talk to you later.
But just because it's a, I think, very important question, I can speak for myself. The hope comes from two places. One is the purpose of every morning when you wake up, there's a purpose. And two is just the awe of nature, right? When you see us, I mean, it makes you sometimes feel small, sometimes it gives you pleasure, and sometimes it makes you sad, but that emotional churn keeps you going, at least for me, yeah?
And I'll just add one sentence. If you become a conservationist, you will meet wonderful people of the world.
Yes.
So you all.
Just hold it.
So you all say like conserve animals, like don't litter and all that. So what can we as students do to conserve our earth for sustainability?
Reduce consumption. First and foremost, reduce consumption. Make informed consumer choice. Even when you consume, what kind of products you're consuming. Is it a company with a good environmental track record? Are they using substances, raw materials which are sourced properly? Can it be disposed of properly? These two things, if every citizen can do, the problem itself gets reduced.
Let me add to what Dr. Ravi said. I want to apologize as adults to the younger generation that at your age, you should not be thinking of how I can contribute and how I can save the plants and animals. I think I'm very sorry for that. If you want to do anything, try and be in natural or wild. I don't know how many wild spaces you can be in, truly wild spaces, but be in wild spaces, natural spaces, and enjoy. I think if you build that connect of, the fascination of looking at a jewel beetle, which kind of is very glistening green, to, hornbills, a flutter of the wings. I think if it entertains you more than, say, a PS4 or something, I think you would have done your part. I don't think it is fair to ask you to go out and do something, yeah?
And a dung beetle rolling a ball of dung. I mean, several times its size and weight.
Thank you so much, dear panelists, for making us smarter today, I think, for helping us think about certain things that we have known at the back of our minds, but not really focused on. Thank you to this wonderful audience for your questions and your engagement. And may we all take something valuable back with us from this conversation. And as the young man in the front row had just asked, what can we all do? And I think if nothing else, if we can just start counting the number of plastic wrapping layers that the products we buy have, and maybe even making a choice on that basis, we are being kinder to our planet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.